Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, I want to highlight a janky, awesome, underrated budget card that I do not think is getting enough attention. This is one of those cards that you're going to cast and your opponents are going to be like, what in the world does that do? And then when they find out, well, they're gonna be in big trouble. So what is Fade Away, what does it do, and why should you be considering it for some of your decks? Well, let's jump into it to find out. So according to EDH Rec, Fade Away is just seeing play in, well, 0% of eligible decks. I mean, it is seeing play in 1,067 out of a possible 400,000 decks. So yeah, well less than 1%, and yes, I do want to mention that EDH Rec data is not perfect, but it's the best we've gotten. Yeah, it's a pretty good source just to find out how popular certain cards are or how much certain cards are played in comparison to others. So though it's not perfect data, it's still a good resource for things like this. Regardless, again, I believe this 50 or so cent card is most definitely underrated, while of course being janky and awesome and really effective in a lot of situations. Fade Away is a sorcery for a 2 and a blue, and its Oracle text reads, for each creature, its controller sacrifices a permanent unless they pay 1. This is an effect that can come out of nowhere, especially on a blue card. I mean, when it comes to board wipes in blue, pretty much all of them are bounce spells. Mass bounce spells, yes, and some very effective ones, but they're bounce spells. So in many situations, it's more of a delaying tactic and not one that can actually permanently get rid of things. Now, I'm not saying that those aren't effective cards. Obviously, Cyclonic Rift is an incredibly effective card, but Fade Away is a way that you can actually get rid of things permanently. And actually, in many situations, this can be basically a one-sided board wipe that can force your opponents to make a lot of tough decisions. Obviously, you can prepare yourself for needing to sacrifice permanents or, paying to make sure that you don't have to, but your opponents may have already tapped out on their turn and they don't have a way to actually pay for their creatures. This can be especially effective against a go-wide strategy like a token deck that's going to have a lot of creatures, and even if they're not tapped out, really can't pay for all of them. So they're going to have to decide how many creatures to pay for and what permanents to sacrifice. And actually, even if your opponents do have mana open and can pay for their creatures, they're still wasting mana trying to save their things when they could have used that on other spells. So at the very least, this can be a way to shut your opponents off from casting more spells before they can untap. Again, there's a lot of situations where this janky but awesome card can be incredibly useful. And it can be especially useful in a deck that actually wants to sacrifice some of its own permanents. And we'll talk about a specific one here in a bit, but yeah, say that you've got an aristocrat-style strategy and you want to sacrifice some things for value, this lets you do it for free. Okay, on top of paying the 3 to actually cast the spell, you know what I mean. So this card really has the potential to be a massive blowout, one-sided board wipe that can provide you additional value in just blue. Again, blue cards don't really do this, or at least I should say they don't really do this anymore. I mean, there aren't too many blue wraths that do anything outside of bouncing things. And again, at just 3 mana, this is incredibly easy to cast and keep whatever mana up for the creatures that you need, or don't. But now let's move on and talk about what decks this is currently being used in, and actually when I say being used in, that might be a bit generous with the percentages that I'm seeing right now. And the first commander that I want to talk about is actually one that I included Fade Away in recently, which is Lyn Cheerful Tormentor. So if you haven't seen my episode on Lyn, make sure you check that one out at some point, but not right now because that'd be very rude for you to leave me right now and I'd be very sad. And again, even though Lyn is showing up as one of the very few commanders that includes Fade Away, the percentage is, well, very small. I mean, it's only at 1.64% of 1,038 decks, so yeah, 17 decks in total include Fade Away, and it is an incredible card in this deck. Again, Lynn says, whenever a curse is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return to the battlefield attached to you at the beginning of the next end step. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may attach a curse attached to you to one of your opponents. If you do, draw 2 cards. So when you cast Fade Away, you can choose to sacrifice a couple of your curses if you want to, so they go away and then come back so you can move them to someone else. Or more importantly, in combination with some Constellation cards, which see a lot of play in Lynn decks, they can be incredibly impactful. Again, the Constellation mechanic is basically, hey, whenever an enchantment comes into play, do this. So Fade Away has the potential to be a mass board wipe that gives you a ton of additional value and helps do what this deck wants to do. And yet again, it only sees play in 17% of eligible decks, even though it is an incredibly budget-friendly card. Moving on, the only other commanders that show up on the Fade Away EDH rec page are Zur, Verizal, Braids, Vadrik, Min, Narset, and Orvar. That's it. And again, like I mentioned, the percentages are incredibly low of the actual decks that even use Fade Away. Zur the Enchanter is less than 5%, Verizal's at 4, Braids is at 2.5, so is Vadrik, Min is less than 2, so is Narset, and Orvar is just over 1. Now, obviously, commanders have different ways that you can build around them, and obviously certain builds are going to be more effective with Fade Away, but still. I'll just highlight 2 of these commanders and talk about why Fade Away might be really good with them and why that percentage should increase. So let's start off with Zur the Enchanter. Zur has, when it attacks, you may search your library for an enchantment card with converted mana cost 3 or less put into the battlefield. If you do, shuffle your library. Yeah, Zur decks can definitely be stacksy if, built in that direction. And when they are built in that direction, Fade Away can be incredibly impactful. So go get some stacksy pieces with Zur to deny your opponents of their resources, and then cast Fade Away, and your opponents are pretty much going to lose out on a lot of their things. And again, even if they do have the mana up to pay for their creatures, well, they're going to be denied that mana for other things then. Which can be even worse against a Zur deck that is built in that stacks direction because it can also deny untap. So players might only be able to untap maybe one of their lands, and being forced to tap a lot of them, well, that's pretty much game over. Regardless, another commander that I think definitely needs to utilize Fade Away in more decks is Min, Wily Illusionist. Min is a 1/3 gnome wizard that says whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with this creature gets +1/+0 for each other illusion you control. On top of that, whenever an illusion you control dies, you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to that creature's power from your hand onto the battlefield. So get some illusions out, and then sacrifice whatever ones you want to cheat permanents from your hand into play. While also, either forcing your opponents to tap a lot of their mana or lose a lot of their things. Again, Fade Away has a ton of applications, and with these commanders, I definitely think it should be seeing play in more of their decks. And also, plenty of other commanders that weren't on that Fade Away EDH rec page should be considering it as well. For example, one commander that might want to consider it is Krufix, God of Horizons. Krufix says you have no maximum hand size, and if unused mana would empty from your mana pool, that mana becomes colorless instead. So you can save up a ton of cards and a ton of mana with this commander, and you can utilize that mana to save the creatures that you want to save. You're pretty much never going to be short on mana with a commander like this. And again, in these colors, there are very few board wipes that permanently get rid of things. Moving on, another commander that might want to consider this is Emry, Lurker the Lock. Emry is a 1/2 that's going to cost 1 less cast for each artifact you control, and when she enters the battlefield, you put the top 4 cards of your library in your graveyard. And by tapping, you may choose target artifact in your graveyard. You may cast this card this turn. There are plenty of artifacts out there that you actually want to sacrifice for value, so cast Fade Away, sacrifice the artifacts that you're going to sacrifice, and then you can just recast them from your graveyard thanks to Emry. And how about Melik Izzet Paragon? Melik says you may cast instant sorcery spells from the top of your library, and whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell from your library, copy, you may choose new targets for the copy. Basically, hey, you know what's more fun than 1 Fade Away? 2 Fade Aways, so have fun trying to pay for all of that. Or how about Eloise Nephalia Sleuth? Eloise has whenever another creature you control dies, investigate, and whenever you sacrifice a token, surveil 1. So you can use Fade Away to sacrifice a lot of your creature tokens to investigate a ton and to surveil a lot as well. Moving on, how about Marchesa the Black Rose? Marchesa has Dethrone, and other creatures you control have Dethrone, and whenever a creature you control with a +1 counter on it dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. Many Marchesa decks are built around threat and effects and gaining control of creatures permanently, so yeah, threaten some creatures, cast Fade Away, and then sacrifice the creatures that you want to sacrifice. Or should I say, after you get a counter on those creatures by attacking the player that has the most life or tied for the most life so that you can get them back with Marchesa. And the final commander that I'm going to bring up that should definitely be considering Fade Away is Child of Alara. Child of Alara is a 6/6 with trample, and when it's put into a graveyard from play, you destroy all non-land permanents that can't be regenerated. Basically, Space Baby go boom. So yeah, if the situation's right, just cast Fade Away and don't pay for Space Baby. Regardless, as you can see, Fade Away is definitely a janky, awesome, and underrated card that deserves a lot more respect than it's getting. It is a versatile and potentially one-sided board wipe that can even benefit you by allowing you to sacrifice things that you actually want to sacrifice. So I urge you, if you've got a deck that wants a card that's as janky, awesome, and underrated as Fade Away, just give it a try. Again, this card currently is just around 50 cents, so it's very budget friendly. So give it a try and have fun hearing your opponents say, "What in the world is that and what does it do?" And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.